Layers of Fear 2 is a first-person psychological horror game where you play as an unnamed actor on a cruise liner. Atmosphere. Layers of Fear 2 is yet another dazzling game by Bloober Team, and like their other games, it goes above and beyond to create well-designed and beautiful environments for the player to walk through. There's some gorgeous moments of artful, dramatic scenes, but there's also some moments of boring nothingness, and lots of them, in fact. There's not a lot of tension even in some of the most dramatic moments, and the game musters, at its best, some minor mystery and apprehension besides the awe of beholding its environments. Its surreal and abstract nature is sometimes bewildering as you leave the ship behind and travel into various movie scene-like locations from cinema history, but the whole game feels like an art museum with set piece after set piece being strangely beautiful to admire, but very rarely scary in any way. The music feels pensive as the early game sees you exploring the cruise liner, but sort of morphs into this distorted 1920s lounge music that's very reminiscent of everything at the end of time. And as the game goes through its decline and through its various acts, it becomes less memorable, which really mirrors the game's theme of loss of identity of self. The second and third acts have several abstract puzzles and seemingly irrelevant choices that slow down the experience, and it's really difficult to tell what they bring to the game, with the choices really not seeming to matter at all. The final act is the only one that really stood out, being a decayed and twisted version of the first act, with most of the ship being rendered as if underwater. It's more moody, but only really on a base level. Even with all its movie references, it just doesn't seem to do anything for me. The atmosphere never really seems to go anywhere, and it makes me miss the opening moments on the ship where there was at least a feeling of mystery to push things forwards. That's no Harry Masons. Scares. The game is mostly set pieces and almost rapid fire as you walk from one room to the next, with mannequins twitching into life here and there and arranging themselves in unsettling ways. There's several jump scares that are usually so far apart from each other they often catch you off guard. Most of them are very small, like things suddenly moving on their own, relocating, or the classic door suddenly shutting when you get close to it. But that's about all the game really offers besides the chase sequences. The chase sequences seem like an afterthought, and some of them feel a bit cheap. They're often sprung on you so randomly that it's not always easy to tell that you were meant to run before you died, and it's not always clear how to avoid death in some scenarios too, which makes the encounters feel more like a chore than anything. The game sadly doesn't offer much else. There's lots of set pieces, but there's only so many times you can be afraid of the sudden appearance of a stage dummy. That's still no Harry Masons. Sound design. The music is really great, with some wonderfully strange and tense pieces of music, from the cabin room tune of 2 alternating notes that bring about a thoughtful sounding ambiance to the early sections, to the lumbering and distorted lounge music that loops back and forth. There's some great string pieces and haunting metallic ambient drones too. The sound effects are all very realistic but feel a bit flat, with nothing really popping out. The voice acting by Tony Todd of Candyman fame is fantastic, with him sounding completely demonic, and his disembodied voice, whilst always saying relentlessly cryptic and seemingly nonsensical things, still manages to haunt the game. The child voice actors are less impressive and a lot less convincing, but still fairly decent. There's directional audio and it's functional, but the game doesn't really utilize it very much. The sound design is really what you expect from a highly polished game like this. That's one Harry Mason. Gore. There isn't really any gore, and there didn't seem to need to be any. That's 2 Harry Masons. Story. The story follows a method actor who is brought onto a cruise ship by a mysterious director who encourages the actor to lose themselves and build this character for them. At the same time, it follows 2 young stowaways who are hiding on board the ship and using their imagination to try and fend off the dark reality of the situation they're in. Whilst the stowaway story is more relatable, it's not very clear what's happening during it, and it always felt like pieces were missing. It's also not clear to me what these 2 storylines had in common. The actor's story feels so abstract and disjointed thanks to the lack of context for each scenario that it was a genuine struggle to figure out what was happening for a large portion of the game, and with the theme of losing oneself, this really didn't help either. Whilst the director gives you encouragement towards specific actions, it's not always clear what you're doing and why he likes it. As for the stowaway story, you can tell something horrible befalls them in their life as the stowaway is becoming more desperate as the crew of the ship become more hostile to them, but the way it's conveyed to the player feels messy. Like the original Layers of Fear, some pivotal points in telling the story are only available if you find specific items that you can easily walk past in some of the more confusing sections, which could explain why the story feels this way. There are multiple choices too, but again it's not clear what impact they had on the story since it's so obtuse. At the end of the day, Layers of Fear 2's message gets lost in its abstraction and ends up feeling like a haunted house ride of bewildering events, making the final score 2 out of 5 Harry Masons. Layers of Fear 2 is dazzling. It's impressive in so many design and technical ways. Its environments are carefully crafted and it's clearly made with a lot of love and care, but it doesn't evoke anything. Its horror elements are once again pushed to the back in favour of its visuals. Even after looking the story up online, it didn't feel like it was really enough to push the events of the game along, or do anything other than provide a backdrop for the art made for the game. And so it kind of twists in this limbo. It's an experience, but besides an experience in the surreal form of cinema, it's unclear what they were trying to really do here. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I was moonstruck by dummies, I certainly did not scream like a banshee or run over the computer. I advise you don't either. There will be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. Let's go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.